AITAA for keeping score of everything I've ever done for my husband? I'm a woman in my late 50s, married to my husband, early 60s. We've been married for 30-odd years. I have fulfilled the role of a traditional wife for much of our marriage, and I left paid work soon into our marriage. My husband is very successful in his business, and we live comfortably. All our children are adults now. My husband built his business from the ground up, and I was instrumental to the early success which set it up to be what it is today. We were having lunch with our children when my son mentioned that his wife didn't want to be trad wife and do what I did to raise the kids. She raised concerns about how vulnerable a position it is, and that she doesn't want to solely depend on him for money. He wanted me to talk to her and convince her by telling her how it worked out for me. I said I understood where she was coming from, and being a housewife is incredibly risky and vulnerable, especially if he leaves her and she's been out of the labor force for a while. He countered that it had worked for his father and I because I trusted him as my husband to provide for me, and why couldn't his wife do the same? I told him I have a meticulous record of all contributions I have ever made to the family business, recently digitized with the help of my daughter, so that if the worst ever happened, I wouldn't be relying on the mercy of a man to feed myself. I told him I have made many contingency plans over the years to minimize the risk of being a housewife and compensate for my lack of pension and benefits I'd have had I not left the labor force. My son and husband were angered by this. Both said it showed a lack of trust, and my husband especially feels I've had one foot out the door our entire marriage, and that my little escape plan included plans to shaft him of his business. I told him the fact that he refers to it as his business rather than ours is exactly why I kept those records and why I won't be telling my daughter-in-law to do what she doesn't want to do. Eta, note. It's late here, so I'm going to respond in the morning. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for your engagement. I have read and responded to as many comments as I'm able. Thank you for sharing your perspectives and 99% of you being really polite. I'm going away for a spa weekend with the women in my family this weekend, so I'm going to use that time to reflect and decide how to proceed. Take care XX edit. We have arrived at the spa. Ended up being me and my daughters, Inc. by marriage, so it's going to be a good weekend to chat freely about this. Thank you for deciding I'm not the AA. My daughters read the thread and also feel I'm not in the wrong. I'll continue to periodically engage if I see something, but for the most part, I'm going to spend quality time with my girls and relax. Bye for now, XXNTA. That's legal savviness right there. What do men obtain out of getting their wives to entirely throw their financial security into the wind? Barring separation and divorce, what happens to the wife if the husband dies unexpectedly? Does she throw herself in a fire? End up living in the streets because the husband provided, and now there is no provider and she has no savings, no plan? And what is this modern obsession for trad wives? In societies where it takes 2 salaries to care for a family, son is A for not respecting his fiancée wife's wishes. What if she wanted him to be a house husband? What gives him the right to demand of her what she won't give? Husband is A for not understanding that protecting yourself from very possible hardships that have very practical ramifications has nothing to do with not trusting him. It has to do with self-preservation. The crazy thing about the current tradwife movement is that men who say they want a tradwife often are actually saying they want someone to work full-time and pay 50-50 towards all household expenses, but then also take on all of the cooking, cleaning, and childcare. Oh yeah. They want the advantages of traditional living and the advantages of progress, none of the disadvantages, and apparently telling them that is bitterness. But they're the one getting angry at the fact that no woman wants to work 40 hours a week at a job to pay the bills and then spend the remaining 72 hours of the week where they're not sleeping, doing all of the house chores and child-minding, while hubby does nothing. The fact that they don't get that no woman would want anything to do with that deal is telling that they don't see women as people. They quote, "We got a crazy wave of talk radio and podcasts whispering in their ears, convincing them this is the natural order of things, and women who don't fall in line are freaks of nature. May they live a long life of solitude and rejection, and then die sexually frustrated and confused that no woman wants to touch their P-P. Judging from the declining birth rates, this is exactly what's happening. I LOL constantly at all these male-dominated patriarchal governments wailing about the dropping birth rate, while failing to address rampant misogyny in their societies, China, South Korea, Japan, US, etc. Being a modern mother is more often than not a bum deal. Either you're expected to be a trad wife who can easily be exchanged for a newer model, or you're expected to be a career mother who still takes the economic hit during childbearing years, per Professor Claudia Goldin's Nobel Prize work. We thought that the mother instinct was so strong in women, we could treat them however we want, and they'd still give us sons/cannon fodder/low-wages slaves/taxpayers. Turns out, if we want babies, we have to take away rights from women. They were given the ability to choose, but their choices don't align with what we want. It's time for a return to the natural order. Kinda deal that is the rise in extreme right beliefs such as abortion ban, birth control ban, restrictions, ending no-fault divorces, etc. With modern science and the rise of women's rights. Women don't have to be mothers. And many choose not to because society has structured it to suck balls. The powers that be can structure motherhood to not suck so much balls. Some democratic socialist countries have done so. Much of the US is choosing the forcing route. Paid family leave? What's that LOL? Subsidized free early childhood care? Snort. Give birth and rip up your body, then get back to work. Female wage slave breeder. And yes, they'll go for all birth control and then contraceptives. It will work. For a while. Babies will be born to those least able to afford them. The elites in red states shall fly to blue states for gold star treatment. Modern medicine. Romania and Decree 770 and its ugly fallout awaits. Unless you vote. I voted. Motherhood in a system based around nuclear families and where double income is needed still sucks. Was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. When the kids were in school all day, I went back to teaching. After he saw 3 checks in a row, he decided to walk out. No problem. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. I had a fun career teaching, 30 years, and did not have to deal with the EX. And the kids and I have been fine, and 3 terrifying cases in Texas of abusive men using the bounty laws against abortion to punish women who dared to leave them. I quote, "We've been advising every one of my friends not to move to Texas for any reason. Because of this exactly. The risk to women is just too great. And TBH, I think women need to leave Texas in droves. I'd personally rather live in a nunnery than Texas right now. Well, be on guard because they're coming for your right to vote, so they can continue to carry out their sick plans. Hide your wife, hide your kids, and hide your husband, because they're coming for everybody's rights out there." I was reading an article about South Korea's low birth rates, 0.8, and it detailed all the reasons why. A grueling competitive system to graduate university and get a job anyway, long work hours once you get there. Pressure for women to quit and then assume 100% responsibility for the children and household, the astronomical cost of housing, and other factors. One woman described it this way. Her entire life until her late 20s, she grinded to get through high school and college and get her first job. Now that she finally has some freedom to enjoy the spoils of her labor, her society wants her to quit and disappear into a house laden with child-rearing responsibilities. This is generational level fucking around and finding out. I lived in Japan for several years and loved it, but I witnessed this personally. Women being pressured into quitting once they had a child. Women becoming the mother and totally subsumed once they had kids. Women getting paid less than men even when they were doing as much, if not more work, managing, and so forth. I understand from various data points that SK is even more sexist than Japan. So yeah, being a parasite single looks like a pretty good deal compared to you will now become sexless mother, while your husband stays out incredibly late constantly due to pressures from his boss and probably has a side chick too. Women getting paid less than men if they even get hired, right? I remember that 2018 scandal where Japan's premier hospital admitted they'd been altering women's test scores for basically a decade to keep women as doctors under 25%, or even under 20%. The laws around abuse of women and children are also pretty messed up there. I was drunk has been used to lessen punishment for truly heinous crime, and is considered a legit defense. A man who kidnapped a little girl and hurt her, I can't. Thinking of it disturbs me, leaving her permanently injured and needing one of those bags for dealing with excrement, was able to use that as a defense and got a very low sentence. He now is out free there. Also, one of the largest CSAM sites in the world, like it was international, was run by a fellow in SK. His sentence was criminally low, despite enabling some very troubling pain. And, despite requests from other countries for extradition, since his site also enabled sex criminals for both viewing and creating, SK has refused. I've been watching stuff from Rotten Mango, and while the cases she discusses are truly dark and extreme, the laws that allow the perpetrators to get away with it, essentially, is indicative of a larger issue of SK society. It is part of why there's this struggle around women's rights there. Why have a kid for a society that not only won't protect you but also them? I've never been so happy to be a freak of nature. No marriage, no children, financially secure, just retired. Personally, I love being a freak of nature. I also saw my mother really struggle after my dad left, trying to become employable after 20 years of being a SOM. I quote call that the neo-trad movement. A delusional dream for men and a ball and chain for women. One slip and you will sink with that. The only way for a trad relationship have a semblance of equity is if the woman would have sole responsibility for managing the funds. If she has to trust he will keep providing, that he can do the bare minimum to trust she will use the money for the benefit of his family and himself. Unless people have better ideas how a man can demonstrate trust, I call them wife GFF as appliance bros. They are to avoid.